Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.
Hello. When the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, who then, as Minister overseeing the Ministry for Niger Delta Affairs, appeared before the House of Representatives Committee on the Niger Delta Development Commission in 2020 and started making revelations which indicted members of the National Assembly, he was brusquely and loudly told, "Off your mic." In October 2024, President Bola Tinubu created the Ministry for Regional Development and dissolved the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. The purpose is essentially to coordinate the activities of the old and new regional development commissions across Nigeria. Our article today is inspired by the recent developments involving the North Central Development Commission, NCDC. Will the appropriation of 1.2 billion naira for telephone bills, 10 billion naira for luxury cars, and other similar profligacies bring about the needed interventions in the region ravaged by violence? Or will it become like earlier commissions, a slush fund for the feeding pleasure of board members and in collusion with members of the National Assembly? Our mic here is not about to go off. Welcome to Conversation with Azu, our weekly diary on life and politics. Our column today is titled, "What Will They Eat When They Finish the Money?" It is a revealing piece following the recent budgetary approval of 140 billion naira for the North Central Development Commission by the Senate Committee oversighting it in the month of October, 2 months to the end of the year. Azu, the writer of the column, is with me to discuss some critical points on this very interesting topic. You're welcome, Azu.
Thanks for having me once again, Julius. Pleasure to be here.
All right, we just go straight on to the issues at question. The creation of the regional development commissions was a great idea, but might just turn out to be another layer of bureaucracy and attendant corruption. Or what do you think?
No, I agree with that absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of regional commissions is not new. It goes all the way back to early days of Nigeria's independence, when Nigeria actually had was operated on the regional basis. Had regional governments, and each of the regional governments set up some forms of intervention for the growth and development of each of those regions. I think we have borrowed from way back then, but made such a hash of it, obviously. But it seems that the resurgence of interest in this specialist intervention was actually with the unpack, wasn't it? I mean, because of all the things that happened in the Niger Delta at the time, and the degradation and all of this, and pollution and so forth and so on. So unpack was supposed to be an intervention agency, but of course, unpack then was later scrapped, and then you had the NCDC, and so forth and so on. And then when there was some semblance of peace in the region, some other zones in the country, as we now call them, began to agitate to say, well, if this what is source for the goose must also be source for the gander. Of course, things sort of took a much faster pace when insurgency became a major problem in the northeast and northwestern parts of the country. And obviously also the north central has also been affected. I mean, people who, of course, made the point that what the states are getting will not be enough to take care of this, the needs that have arisen as a result of the
devastation
conflict and the devastation. That you needed a special agency to also be able to intervene, the sort of thing that the NCDC is supposed to be doing for the Niger Delta. So that really, so you cannot question the idea or the concept. But the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in how it turns out, and this does not taste like the pudding that those citizens in the Niger Delta actually wanted to eat.
All right, coming closer home, like I referenced in my introduction, still again on the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission. What crossed your mind at that point in which there was a confrontation between the managing director of the commission at the time, Joyce Nunez, the current Senate president, who was Minister of the Niger Delta Affairs, Godswill Akpabio, and then the House of Representative Committee on the floor of Senate, making investigations about appropriations and spending in the NDDC. So, what crosses your mind when you know that kind of a, should I call it a scandal? I'm trying to avoid that. Happens with what is supposed to be a commission that was instituted to bring about, growth and development in a particular region.
I think it's a problem of accountability. That really is the problem we are facing here. Because obviously the National Assembly has clearly stated oversight functions over some of these government institutions. And they are supposed to make these interventions and do this oversight in the interest of the people of the communities involved, as the case may be, or in the interest of the country. But when this sort of thing happens, and then the committee or institution that is supposed to provide oversight now appears to be complicit in the problem, then that really is when you ask yourself whether the whole idea of specialist intervention has not lost its way. Because that is the sense that we now get. There are so many special agencies that are supposed to intervene and to serve the people's interest. But a number of things are beginning to arise from what we see. These intervention agencies are compounding bureaucracy. They are also compounding the layers of corruption. So that really, you are now left to ask yourself the question: what's the point? So I guess that's really where we are. If the agencies that are supposed to hold these interventionist agencies are up to their job and doing exactly what they should be doing, then perhaps we'll be having better outcomes for the benefit of the citizens that these institutions are supposed to serve.
All right, coming closer home to our topic of discussion, and this is the last quarter of the year. One of the critical points you raised in your article is why an annual appropriation is being released at a time the 2026 appropriation should be given overriding consideration.
That's a great question, but let me give some perspective to that. The 140 billion that was, to use the famous phrase now, earmarked for the North Central Development Commission was approved, I think, in February it was, along with the 2025 budget. But at the time that approval was given and that appropriation became a bill, the North Central Development Commission had not been created. It had not been created, or if it had been created, was not
passed by the Act of the National Assembly.
Yes, it was not functioning at that time. It was already, all of that had been done, but there was no management. All right. So it does seem to me that what the both the executive and civil administrative arm of the National Assembly and the politicians, what they just did was say to themselves, you know what? They already benchmarked, because I think the North East Development Commission or the Northwest Development Commission, I can't remember exactly which one it was, had an approval of about 145.6 billion. So what they just did was to take about 5.6 billion off their amount, and then by some estimates say, okay, you know what, this ought to be enough for.
I think it was the Northwest adopted a blueprint,
and then I just adopted it as a blueprint. Then what obviously then happened was the civil servants in the National Assembly, in cahoots obviously with the politicians, had determined that this money must not go. We must chop this money before this year finishes. Can you allow this money to go like that? And so that is the sort of conspiracy that we see. That's why there is the hurry, because the management was just put in place about 1 or 2 months ago. But if it was an oversight function that is designed or that serves the purpose for which it was intended, it will pause and say, okay, yes, this 140 billion may have been approved, but it's only about 2 or 3 months to the end of the year. And very soon we'll be dealing with the 2026 appropriation. you know what, folks, what are you going to need for the next 3 months? So we can deal with what you are going to need for the next 3 months. And if there is a delay in the passage of the 2026 appropriation bill, we can revisit. But what we're only going to deal with, we are going to look at the details of what you require for the next 3 months and approve that. But the money, you see, the 6 billion for humanitarian purposes, 10 billion for cars, 1.2 billion for phone. That money may have been chopped, pardon my use of that. And that money may just have been chopped already. And so they are just looking for paper trail to cover, to cover what they have done. Otherwise, but I'm hoping, and this is where I land on your question, I'm hoping that the House Committee on the North Central Development Commission will do a much better job than what the Senate Committee has done.
I'll still come back to that point in one of my follow-up questions. So you just hold back as I bring you an excerpt from this very interesting article. And I quote, "It's the sort of reckless spending that dragged the Northeast Development Commission, NEDC, into a needless controversy over whether or not a former secretary to the government of the Federation used 544 million naira for grass cutting." End of quote. So it took the Pioneer Commission, by Pioneer Commission I mean the first, the NDDC. It took the NDDC about 26 years to build a secretariat in Port Harcourt. No serious development has taken place in all of these 3 decades, nearly 3 decades, in the Niger Delta, yet billions and trillions of naira have been budgeted, spent. Someone needs to answer questions.
Oh, obviously, but the question is who will bail the cat. I mean, talking about the NDDC, I think I wrote an article some time ago in which my findings suggested at the time that what the NDDC gets in terms of the budget and what it gets is the equivalent of what 6 of the 6 states
in the Niger Delta.
No, not in the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta states have very high appropriations. But some of the states that get funded, it's about 6 of the 36 states in the country put together. That's what the NDDC gets. But again, I think it then goes back to this question of accountability. Which it does seem to me that it's not just I think we have reached a point where we are not just going to leave that only to the National Assembly. But I think civil societies and members of the affected community also have to do a lot more to hold institutions that are set up to serve their purpose to account. Otherwise, if we just wait until the announcements about appropriations are made and never get back to the question until another fresh round of appropriations we are not going to get out of the ruts at all.
In the early days of the Buhari administration, we had this instance of unspent appropriations being returned to the Federation account. Yes. Perhaps are we to expect this, that the NCDC might just...
Well, that is if there's still any amount of money unspent left. You probably are quite optimistic to anticipate that there is some amount. But something just tells me that all the money is that 140 billion. And interestingly, I got a call from a number of persons, and one particularly saying, "Look, the 140 billion you are talking about is just a
tiny drop in the ocean.
The ocean of what goes on. If you know amount of monies that are put, Senate leaders of the House committees, the various committees get certain amounts allocated to them. 1 billion, I understand that House of Reps members, ordinary House of Reps members, I use that word advisedly because they are all equals in a way. So the House of Reps member gets 1 billion and the senator gets 2 billion. But if you are the chairman of a committee, so sometimes when politicians are fighting themselves, you have to follow the money to know exactly what is causing the fight. You follow the money, because chairmen of some of these committees then get like 20 or 30 times more, and they already take and secure possession of these monies before the ordinary floor members begin to know what is happening. They have already awarded and everything is done and awards are already made for so-called constituency projects that amount to absolutely nothing. And I think that we all need to do more, whether media, National Assembly, civil society, we all need to do more. And then, of course, citizens were also involved too, because this sort of thing is just not, it's not a done thing. Let's say.
All right. Finally, to something you referenced earlier on, you think the House of Representatives have a chance to do something different than the Senate has done
absolutely.
on this?
Yeah.
Now, why are you this optimistic?
Many reasons. One, at least leadership did very well in reporting that story. We flagged it and provided the details. I have also made my commentary on it, which I believe will amplify the issues. I'm tempted to believe, I'd like to believe that members of the National Assembly, that there are honorable persons also there in the National Assembly, as I believe there are in the Senate. But that now that this issue, assuming it was an error on the part of the Senate committee, I am hoping that error, that members of the House committee on the North Central Development Commission will spot that error and use the benefits of the amplification that we have had since that approval was given to deal with the issues and for the benefit of the people of the North Central, for which that commission has been set up.
All right, for more on this article, as always, I say just the full text is on azuishekwene.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our content. Thanks for coming on the show, Azu.
Thanks for having me.
Bye for now.